Welcome to the latest episode of the Anson's podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jonathan Dudley from Crowe Accountants, and we're going to be discussing the art of thrival in a challenging economy. So, for the first time on the Anson's podcast today, I am delighted to welcome what I hope will be the first of a number of external guests on the pod. And here with me today is Jonathan Dudley. We've recorded this a couple of times, this intro now, so I'm not even going to try and get your specific title right, Jonathan. You are an accountant from Crowe, and go on, what's the actual full title?
Right, I'm National Head of Corporate SME Business, small and medium-sized enterprises, and Head of Manufacturing Business for the firm.
And practically, what does that mean that you do?
It's all about focusing the delivery to our clients and opportunities and intermediaries that are in the corporate sector.
Yeah.
But I'm focused on SMEs.
Yeah.
But another hat I wear is anything to do with manufacturing or engineering. Is my particular penchant. Which
when we're here
when
we're here today, sort of in an old, I think it's an old nail factory that we're recording this in. So it's quite pertinent in terms of. I think there's probably been a dispute if we're in Wolverhampton this morning whether that's strictly in the Black Country or not. I think there's a bit of a debate that goes on there on that front.
I think we're on the right side of Wolverhampton. I think half of Wolverhampton is and half of Wolverhampton isn't.
You'd say half it's sort of almost Staffordshire, really.
Well, it's all in Staffordshire, but yeah.
In old money terms.
But, I mean, where we are today is a few hundred yards away from where my father made his fortune.
I've sort of heard something of this story. So go on. So I guess this comes on to how you became. Does that link into how you became an accountant yourself?
Yep.
So
absolutely.
what was your father's business that was located so close to you?
My father was actually an electrochemist, but he was a chemist. He trained with ICI back in the day. He was also a bit of a frustrated inventor, and he was a works director for a number of metal finishing businesses, one of which remains to be the market leader today. But when that business sold, he decided to start his own business up, which he did here in Wolverhampton, just in what was the old Villiers factory, which is just over the back here. And it was very successful. What did that business do? Was that metal finishing? Or? Yeah, it was all kinds of electroplating, including every bit of nasty you can imagine. I've still got some cyanide burns I could show you to this day.
And is this sort of like deep frying a Mars bar, but it's metal? Kind of.
No.
Oh. I've been to a client's factory where they dip metal in what looked like a chip fat.
So yeah, sort of, but that would probably be acid.
Right, okay.
So it would be picking up raw manufactured goods.
Yeah.
It would then be applying usually an electroplating finish to those manufactured goods. And that might be zinc. It might be zinc and passivate. If you look at anything and it looks like it's a weird gold colour, that's called zinc and passivate. And it would be chrome. He used to do bumpers for the old MGs.
Was a lot of it focused on the car?
Even.
Oh, car. It could be anything.
Complete. Yeah. I mean, one of the big production items was the metal spear that you put in the back garden to put your rotary clothes dryer on, and that was called a saw spear, and that would generally be either black painted or zinc and passivate, because obviously under the ground it'd rot, wouldn't it?
And they coat the bit that would stick in the ground. They would basically do a coating.
And even down to if you imagine you're out in the countryside and you look at a fence with sort of a wire fence and then a post, you'd have the bolts that would fit into the post that the wire would go into.
Yeah, if to lock it in place,
like an eye bolt.
Yeah.
Well, we used to cadmium plate the eye bolts.
Okay. Cadmium, is that a type of chemical? Is that
That's
is
a
that on
heavy metal.
is it on the periodic table, cadmium?
Yes.
Can you remember what the
no?
Is it like CD or something?
No. I used to be good on that, but anyway, I worked for my father in sort of like weekends and holidays all through my youth, and my father had some challenges because. Ironically enough, he with doing this plating, certain things are a bit complicated, and sometimes you need to sort of like have some particular tooling. In those cases, they were called jigs, which would be what they call the anodes, which would make sure that the plate would throw in the electroplating substance. And he invested quite a lot of money into a new automotive customer of his, which, yeah. Bit unfortunate. It was a lot of money back in the very early 80s. Doesn't sound like a huge amount of money now. It wouldn't do, but the equivalent of probably about £500,000 today. And unfortunately, that business was the DeLorean sports car company.
Oh crikey! This is the Back to the Future car, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's better known for that now, but at the time, the DeLorean was the car that was. It was a pink elephant. Is it a pink elephant? It didn't turn into. It got a lot of excitement, but no one bought it, right?
Well, people did buy it, but the build quality on it was rubbish. And of course, he ran in. John DeLorean got into some difficulty financially with it because people were getting a bit annoyed with the production. And the quality, and he needed some more money, and he decided to trade in some things he shouldn't have done and got arrested at an airport, and the whole business collapsed, if you remember.
Your dad having invested in quite a lot of substantial sum of money to be their main supplier of those
of this particular the plating on this component. So it put a big dent into my dad's business at the time, and interestingly enough, he made the decision that actually I've made my money out of it, I'm going to close my business. And he consulted his accountant and he agreed with him. And I didn't.
How old were you at the time?
I was 19. And I said, I don't know why you're doing that, Dad. And actually, I was proved right because obviously people that picked up the business ran on with the business and it was successful. And he could have sold the business on rather than do anything else, but he just didn't get the advice he needed. And I know you're a big sportsman.
Yes, there's this big people who challenge that, but yes, go ahead, please.
But back in those days, I also did it. I was also mucking around doing a bit of not being very good at cricket, and I used to love playing cricket, just wasn't very good at it. So what they used to do was to get me to be the scorer. And there's nothing more stressful in life than being the scorer in cricket.
Yeah,
because everybody expects you to do it. Everyone expects you to get it right, but you get it wrong, they'll give you a right share of it.
I've seen it. My son plays, and even though they do it on the phones, a lot of it on the phones these days, there can be controversy for sure.
Leg buys are very difficult to judge, and the point is you get it right, nobody cares. You get it wrong, everybody cares. And the point is I think my father's accountant was just like the cricket scorer. He was just keeping score. And really, I made the decision that actually he needed someone out there batting with him. And because he hadn't got somebody out there batting with him, he made a pretty expensive choice in the end to just pack in what he was doing. Because everything else he was doing was fine. But it's like it had really knocked him. And that really made me think, well, actually, I want to be an accountant, but I want to make a difference. And that's why I became an accountant.
But to challenge, what really your dad needed someone to challenge some of his thoughts there and look at the different possibilities that he'd got.
Yeah, and that's what probably what I'm talking to a lot of people about at the moment, because let's face it, it's not easy out there. We've got global events going on. I was talking to somebody last night, and they said they wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and the first thing they look at is what's happened across the pond and what's the president done today. And I was talking to a client of mine only yesterday afternoon that spent a week sort of like really reorganising what he's doing, because he's in Canada, and 50% of his business is across the border in the USA.
Yeah.
And he said, there's no way we could do 25% tariffs. But and that, there's that kind of thing going on. But, there's a lot of people out there at the moment with the rises in national insurance and what have you. There's a fight to survive. But actually, the point was, because when DeLorean went down, and I think that probably influenced the accountant and my father to make the decision to just close the doors, make everyone redundant and whatever. But actually, the point was, whatever's left at the end of the day, even in a period of downturn, meant that whoever was left made 3 times as much money, because like the weaker competitors have been taken out of the equation. And what I love helping businesses do is not just to survive, but also to thrive. So I've come up with a new word called Thrival.
No, I like this. But I'm not going to let you go to Thrival yet, because I just wanted to sort of set the... We definitely need to talk about that, but I wanted to just contextualise some of those issues, particularly in manufacturing at the moment. I did read something last week, and I'm not getting you trying to do a general knowledge quiz here, but it said that manufacturing is still like somewhere in the region about 8% of the national GDP, something of that order.
That's what the civil servants say, but they're wrong.
You think it's a lot more, a lot less, unfortunately?
It's more. There was a study done by Lloyds Bank and I think Cambridge University just last year, and they said that the real impact on GDP was north of 20%. But actually, the reality is even greater than that, because if it's 20% of the nation's GDP, how many hairdressers, nail bars, chip shops, accountants, lawyers depend upon the JLR plant?
Yeah.
Indirectly. And if JLR decided not to be at Castle Bromwich, what would happen to the local community, the local chip shop? The directly opposite there's a retail park. Well, would they still need the retail park? The knock-on effect is huge.
Yeah, I mean, even in my own hometown of Rugeley, between Rugeley and Lichfield, is a village called Armitage, and we all know what Armitage Shanks manufactures, and the impact of that factory. It is a manufacturer on the local economy is absolutely massive.
Or in the same way, another kind of manufacturing is actually brewing.
Yeah.
You take the brewing out of Burton, it's a ghost town.
Yeah, and actually, we're in Wolverhampton now. We're sat in an office that's been repurposed from a former nail factory. Wolverhampton itself has seen a lot of manufacturing decline since probably the late 70s, 1980s. In terms of the current challenges facing manufacturing, we have got what Trump's doing on the tariffs, which is something that we haven't really seen too many trade wars certainly in my career that's had too much of an impact. You're going to challenge me
not
on that
directly.
No, we've got that going on.
Yeah.
In the UK though, electricity and energy prices for manufacturers are a massive challenge.
And I just saw some stats yesterday that they're up again in the UK. And even before that, we're paying for power something like a third more than Europe. And that's purely down to the fact that we're paying a premium to be green, which is fine because that's the right way to go about it. But because the rest of the world is not on a level playing field, and until you get the rest of the world on the level playing field, if we are going to actually support trade in the UK, because it's not just manufacturers that use power, something has to give. There needs to be, that probably is where somebody, needs to take the Chancellor, turn her upside down and shake her pockets to actually
if you want us to do some of this stuff, we need some assistance. If you want that as a policy decision, then we definitely need some help. I mean, could they do something almost like, that farmers have red diesel?
Yeah.
Is there something that they could do like that for manufacturers?
Well, there's all things they could do. They could actually put in they could actually put in a discount that's applied to the power suppliers to actually give or subvent a discount for certain supplies, but that doesn't apply. So there's a big drive in manufacturing at the moment to automate and digitise. Yeah. Industry 4, will those machines use more power? And therefore, even before the power crisis that started about 3-4 years ago, most manufacturing businesses were using a lot more electricity. But if they're using that electricity and they are paying 33% more for that electricity than their opposite numbers and competitors are in France, in Germany or whatever, that's a real challenge. Wow. But you see, there's only, one of the things I do is through the networks I work through, I get that message across.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, while we're doing all that lobbying, how are you going to pay the wages on the Friday night? And I know, because I lived it with my father right through my young age. Even somebody said to me, "What do you know about manufacturing? What do you know about running a small business? You're an accountant. You don't know what it's like to wonder on a Thursday night, can you pay the wages tomorrow?"
Yeah.
And I said, "You know what? I do."
Yeah, because you literally saw your dad do it throughout your childhood.
Oh yeah,
right?
and he involved the whole family in it. Sort of saying, "Look, we're going to have to sort of like sell a car to pay the wages," and that's why we had to do stuff sometimes. So I know what it's like, and just sort of saying, "Oh well, we need the government to do this, we need the government to do that." That's right, got to do that. But in the meantime,
you can't control what the government's going to do.
You can't control what you can't control. So, what can you do with what you can control?
And let's move back to that then, because they're vital for the economy. You think that their contribution to GDP is actually understated, and I can see particularly how that is, especially
directly or indirectly.
When you indirectly expand it out, it's massive. And there are some great manufacturing businesses out there that you're sort of ridiculously proud to have acted for and have advised over the years, doing all sorts of fantastic world-leading work.
Still do.
But in this context then, we've got external things that make life difficult, things that we can't control, from what the national insurance rate is to the price of electricity to the green agenda, which is challenging for manufacturers. If I am a leader of a manufacturing business, or indeed any business, because other businesses will face some of those challenges, how do you approach it with your clients then? You mentioned Thrival. Let's get into that.
Okay. Well, if I answer straight on the national insurance point that obviously we all found out about in October, I immediately, everyone I was meeting was, "Do you know what your number is?" So from October, with 6 months to run up, and I think that was the Chancellor's point, is you got 6 months to sort your affairs out, which in fairness, that was provided. A lot of people, when I said, "Do you know what the number is, your number is?" and they'd say, "Well, what number's that?" Well, how much your wages are going to go up by, your wages cost are going to go up by on the 1st of April because of the NI changes. And alarmingly, as late as December, I was still meeting people saying, "Oh, no, I don't know," But all of my clients, I made them work it out. Or
Including us, may I hasten to add. Yeah.
And I said, okay, so all right. So that is an exposure.
Yeah.
Right? So the art of thrival is all about working out, I'll come back to exposures in a minute, where the resiliences are in your business, what the opportunities that the circumstances that you find yourself are in your business, what the exposures are to your business, and national insurance going up or power cost increases are definitely exposures.
Sure.
And what are the risks to your business? And if you think about it, the other way, I love an analogy.
Go on.
And actually, as resiliences, opportunities, exposures, risks. Misspells raw, doesn't it?
Yes.
Right. So it's all about what are you going to do to make your business raw? Not just whimper a bit, I mean raw. And that's the art of thrival, not survival. It's surviving and thriving, because for those that survive, there's rich pickings coming at the end of the day. Because it is survival of the fittest, isn't it? So you need to make sure you're the fittest. And that's what the art of thrival is all about. So if you can, and it is working on your business, not working in your business. Which
go on, explain the difference between working on and working in.
Well, you know, the point is you'll always have people pestering you on the phone or what have you. And I always say to a business owner, you know what, just go to a quiet space with a piece of paper and write down, what are your resiliences on the left-hand side? What are your opportunities? Have a real think.
So go on, look, resiliences could be sector the specialism that they're on.
Yes. And actually, you know, we were talking offline earlier this morning about, you know, what makes you good at a particular area. And actually, if that particular area is an area that all of a sudden is struggling, well, actually, what made you good at that? And unpack that and then think, okay, that particular area is now struggling. So how can I actually reapply that expertise to a different area, a different type of business or a different income source?
Yeah, I was speaking to somebody actually recently, and they were doing just that, and they were doing some telecoms installation, but fundamentally, a lot of their guys are laying cable in the ground, pulling the cable through. Now, that the subject matter of that when they're doing it is a fibre optic cable, but it could just as easily be a power cable that's, you know, for electronic charging devices or whatever else, and trying to sort of see well, we've got that skill set. We're good at doing that, good at organising the logistics to get the people to the road. There's probably some qualifications. Electric, I think, is different from fibre optics and whatever. But fundamentally, what the guys do when they get there, well, it's the same, right?
It's interesting, actually, because, you know, I won't get too much into this because I'm involved in a business that does that. But actually, a lot of businesses now, if you're going to put sort of like high voltage cable inside a building, yes, you absolutely need an electrician. Yeah. So, but these days, a lot of, you know, the new thing to do is to actually get power over an Ethernet cable, which is very low voltage, for which you don't need an electrician. So if you've got somebody that's good at cabling, that might be one thing you look at. But that's only one example. It's a bit like, I'm trying to think of the analogies that I've thought of, but if somebody is very good at producing a particular kind of drink. I mean, I'm picking big companies, an example that everyone can identify with. A lot of people don't like drinking alcohol anymore.
We've done a podcast on this. It's about our Christmas party. Everyone's drinking Pepsi Max now.
Yeah. Well, actually, you know, that's not good news for Guinness.
No.
So what did they do? They just took their product and completely made it non-alcoholic, and it's probably one of the best-selling drinks in the country right now. And they still sell it for the same price.
Have you tried it?
Yeah.
What did you think?
I think it's fine.
Have you tried the I've told you about this, I'm sure, the Guinness Shandy, which so you've got your 0% Guinness, right? And some of the places now got this on draft. If you get them to pour the 0% Guinness, tastes quite nice. But if you get a sort of Guinness top, real Guinness top on that, you're not particularly increasing the alcoholic content, but it just takes that Guinness taste from sort of 90% to sort of 95%. It's very
but I kind of get it.
Yeah.
But it's a bit like, some of the best people who work on these resiliencies to get back onto it.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Guinness there.
Are people that are in the hospitality trade.
Yeah.
Because, around about this time of year, every pub you see is running a quiz or an event to actually get people in. And yeah, they will serve you cups of coffee and cups of tea because it's dry January. Well, it was dry January, and they're all drinking again now because it's February. But this time of year, pubs and restaurants and whatever are struggling. So they think, well, what have we got? What have we got that's available? How can we repurpose that? How can we sweat our asset? That's a resilience. And actually, then those resiliences, if you lift them out, you're then sort of saying, actually, that's lower down the page. That's an opportunity. It doesn't matter, because if you focus on what has made our business strong, and that will automatically then drive out the opportunities that you might be able to do something about. And then, and only then, you then say, okay, where is our business exposed? Have we got a key person that, they're the only person that knows how to use that machine or operate that process? That's an exposure, isn't it?
Of course.
And what are the and that therefore then drives again the risks. And it doesn't matter where it goes in those four. The idea is just during that sort of like cup of coffee with over lunch or what have you, you spent half an hour working on your business. Now here's the clever bit. You've got resiliencies and opportunities on the left-hand side. You've got exposures and risks on the right-hand side. Yeah?
Yeah.
What you now want to do is to double the power of the stuff on the left-hand side and halve the power of the stuff on the right-hand side.
Double the good stuff, reduce
and
half
the bad stuff. And that's where, you then say, well, what can I do to capitalise on those resiliencies, convert those resiliencies into opportunities? What practically could I do? And what can I do to minimise those exposures? Yeah, minimise their effect. And actually, you're automatically doing a risk analysis. Now, if we go back to the example of how on earth are we going to be able to afford to pay the additional national insurance bill? Yeah. One of the things you could do is raise prices.
Yeah.
Actually, how can we do that? Right. We can't raise prices because we're not doing that. Well, actually, if you're going to raise prices, you might need to change your business model and give it a bit of extra value elsewhere, and you might be able to do that. But if you think about it, it's all about thinking about thriving, not surviving.
If there was another bit of the economy or another higher value product that you could go into at that stage,
correct,
where there's bigger margin and it drives a higher price, but fundamentally is manufactured, for example, in the same way that your product was manufactured, that's an area where it's not just simply just pushing the price up, but you're getting into a sector of the economy where you can earn a bigger margin and a higher price.
And so many businesses fall into the trap of, I've got to do this because my competitor's doing it. Well, that smacks of something called Me Too, doesn't it? And that actually doesn't necessarily work. It might do. But it's all about, where can I get competitive advantage where I'm about to lose it? And that might drive up price. But you'll only do that by working on your business rather than, oh God,
it's happening to you.
Yeah. I need to get this out. I need to just produce more.
But I think what's interesting is that what you're saying is that some of the clues and some of the answers
are in your own head.
and in the practices of the business that what has made you successful when you drill down into it is what can make you thrive in challenging economic circumstances. Yeah. And some of that is thinking in a slightly different way to not just doing what we've already done and tinkering with the dashboard of your business, but rather properly thinking of what really makes this business successful. What is that resilience, and how could we sort of use that strength in a slightly different part of the economy, on a slightly different product, in a slightly different way?
Service. Because it's not... this principle works for a service industry as well as it does for a production industry or anything else.
Yeah, who've all got the same... I mean, people businesses, of course, have got exactly the same challenges for the national insurance, lack of skilled labour, which is pushing salaries up, and they can do the same analysis, right?
Yeah, and one of the key things that I look at is I sit down with people and just sort of say, look, let me just help you for a bit. Let's just you talk through your business, and usually what comes out is we're just not making enough profit to be resilient enough. We're not making enough profit to be to if you like put wool on the back that if it does go wrong, that's an exposure. Well, one of the key things I do with businesses is I do a waste audit. And I won't get too much into what that's all about at the moment, but it was a procedure developed by Toyota back when they were absolutely, before they opened up Burniston. Mm-hmm. And the reason they're probably in Burniston now is that Toyota back in the 1970s became the byword for good business practice.
Is this just in time production and stuff like that? Is it? That's part of it.
Not necessarily, but it, some of the businesses I've been most devastating with waste audits are service-based businesses.
Lawyers,
no comment. But the point is everyone thinks, oh yeah, we've done a cost reduction program or we've done lean, which usually means that you've paid some consultant a vast sum of money somewhere. But again, this is something that is just a process of mind and an attitude of mind that if you showed how to do it, you can do it for yourself.
And so over the course of your career, there's been a few recessions.
Yeah.
08 definitely was one of them. COVID was a bit weird, right? I mean, COVID sort of, the economy shut down for a period. It was unlike any recession that had happened before on one level.
Yeah. But back then I was fortunate enough to be inadvertently advising some people that were making some key decisions, and we played a part in keeping everyone alive then, which I'm quite proud of. But I don't think COVID was not a recession. It was an immediate dead stop.
Yes,
bit different. You would go back to the late 80s, early 90s.
Several recessions.
Several recessions in the 90s, technical recessions. And then, then there was obviously a recession that came out of the financial crisis. So let's call it an economic downturn now, because technically we're not in recession, but...
Feels like it.
I think this is number 5. But what's interesting, and I know where you're going.
You don't actually.
There's a hell of a lot of people running businesses now have never seen one.
Well, that is the case. But what I wanted you to give a little bit of sort of to focus on the positive is that over the course of your career, and even before you'd given it the label Thrival, I'm sure it was something that you were doing before you'd analysed it.
It just boxed it off.
But a lot of your top long-standing clients now have traded through those recessions, come out of the other side, and actually caused them to actually be a lot stronger for it, right?
And the ones that are see exposures and risks ahead and do something about it early enough. And where I've not been able to help people, or where I've sat and observed people getting it wrong, is they do the ostrich in the ground bit. And when you talk to someone in the pub and they say, how's business? And they say, oh, it's awful. Oh, it's awful for us. It's terrible, isn't it? Oh, it's the same for everyone. Wrong answer. Because if it's the same for everyone, that means we're all going up to hell on that handcart. The point is make sure you're not on that handcart, and you get off and start marching in the opposite direction early enough before you get to hell. That's, I suppose, what I'm...
Well, but it goes back to actually that point of the difference between working on your business and working in it, insofar as when you're working in it, the economy and the business is happening to you. You're sort of this boat without a rudder, just sort of the waves are sort of battering you in each direction. I'm not quite sure where this analogy is going to go, because I was going to say you'd rather be the Titanic, but we know what happened to that. But but you want an engine on that, but you want to carve out the time for yourself, even in the darker moments, even when things are, I'll go back to that analogy, the waters are looking stormy, to carve out that time to focus on those.
You need to be able to steer.
Yeah.
You need to know the direction in which to steer in, and therefore you need a chart, to use that analogy, or you need a route map. And it doesn't have to be a terribly important business plan, which the bank manager, when they used to exist, wanted you to have or what have you.
I'm not a great believer in those.
Yeah, it's actually, look, this is where I am now. This is where I want to get to. Okay, how are we going to get there? And if you can do that, it is not, oh, I'm going to take myself out of the business on a retreat for 3 days and ridiculous sort of stuff like that, or think about it for a weekend. Actually, it's the sort of thing that you might sort of have the seed of it with thinking, okay, I'm going to go and walk the dog. Yeah. And then come back and write it down and perhaps sleep overnight, and then just get a trusted advisor to just help you, I don't know.
So put some numbers on that and put some flesh on the bone.
Put some numbers on it. Give it a bit of fair challenge. If you've got a business partner, it's always a good idea to run it past the business partner. But actually, if you just think about those 4 things, which is easy to remember, and just remember RAW.
Yeah, go on. Give it me again. On the one side, I've got
R for resilience.
Yeah.
Yeah. O for opportunities, and there's always opportunities out of everything. If it's raining, sell umbrellas. Yeah. If the sun's shining, still sell umbrellas, because they need the
shade.
Yeah. And sell them an ice cream as well, And
then on the other side of that piece of paper,
exposures. And somebody said to me, what's the difference between an exposure and a risk? Well, an exposure is almost like identifying problems which could be a risk. So it doesn't matter.
They're the same sort of thing.
Because I always think that resilience is, if you know what your resiliences are, it opens up some of the opportunities. But then you might say, well, those are internally generated opportunities. Then you think about your externally generated opportunities. And in the same way, on the opposite side, the exposures and the risks operate internally and externally. And it doesn't kind of matter so long as you identify what those things are. And once you've identified them, you just think, how can I double those positives and halve those negatives? What could I do? And what practically can I do? And what's easy to do? And, if there's stuff that there's nothing you can do about, like I'm paying 33% more for my power. Okay. So, right, if we're paying 33% more for our power, that's an exposure, right? So it presents an opportunity in a way, because what can I do to get more out of that power if I'm paying more for it?
Yeah.
Yeah? And another opportunity might be, where am I wasting power? What can I do about that? So, I'm not saying it crisscrosses, but the whole object of the exercise is get down those 4 and then think, right, what am I going to do about that? And you won't be able to solve all of them on day one, but at least you're making a start. So many people in businesses in an economic downturn just think everything's disastrous, just like my father did say, and he didn't go bust. He just closed.
But he didn't have that. But what he didn't do is he didn't have that conversation. And I guess there's an irony here. If you were to go back in time, ironically, you'd be jumping into the DeLorean time machine and go back to 1981. Yeah. I mean, he'd probably shoot you as you got out of it, maybe. But
I've never watched that film.
Have you, really? There's
for that reason.
There's 3 of them. But if you were to, you jump out of that time machine with Marty McFly and Doc, and you crammed into the back. I don't think there was much room in the back of a DeLorean. But if at that point you go back and advise your father back then, it would have been to do these things. And actually, because somebody else did take that opportunity with his equipment,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't just his equipment. What they did is they took on some really, really skilled and hard-working individuals and popped them into their business and double the size of their business, and just effectively inherited all of his customers because he just shut it. And that's the point, he'd got friends in the business at the time, and they made a lot of money, which is fine because he was, and he was okay, it is what it is what it is. But he left a lot of bread on the table because the point is if he'd actually sort of sat down and said, okay, I've taken a knot back here, but my resiliencies are, my quality is brilliant. It's better than the large business that I shan't name that he'd outplaced him from because he differentiated himself from the company he'd been part of. So I'm better than them. I'm better than my competitors. I'm more cost effective. My quality control is better. So I've got a real opportunity that, there'll be other businesses that are tipping over. My opportunity is I've got 500 customers. Actually, why couldn't I probably try and make that 525 customers? Because I've got all the kit. I comply with all the regulations. I do that. Okay, what are my exposures? Well, I need to organise some finance to be able to do that. I might need to go and buy a new barrel plant. Fine, how am I going to fund that in a way that I manage risk? Now, if he'd had those conversations back then, that business would still be there today. I'm confident of that. And after all those years.
Yeah.
He might have flogged it on, but it would still be earning good money.
Yeah. Well, hopefully your firm would have done the flogging of it for him. There would have been some work, some accountancy work there.
Yeah. I still reckon, when I go around the Black Country and I look at some of the plating that's come out, I think I could do better than that.
Yeah, you must be the only accountant with a good sort of knowledge of the quality of plating.
I can remember. And one of my great prides is I act for a lot of businesses today that I plated bits for as a 14-year-old. I didn't work there before I was 14 because it would have been illegal. But as soon as I was 14, on a Saturday morning, my dad had me operating the barrel plant.
Have you said that to the current owners of
that? Yeah.
In the meeting, said years ago, actually,
There were 2 products they were producing. I shan't mention their name, but they were the one product they were making was a forging that went into part of the suspension of a Ford truck. Mm. And that was a barrel plating product. And the other thing, which was a paint dipping thing, was actually we call they look like a large bullet, but it was the internal workings that ended up in a shock absorber.
Oh, right, okay, on a car. Or
on a car, vehicle, yeah. So there was all sorts of bits and bobs. And that's why to this day I love wandering around seeing how things are made, because I'm thinking, how's the metal finishing on that? What do you do with that?
You mentioned it earlier in this, that there is a lobbying element to your job and some of the organisations that you're involved in. So as it stands, I follow your LinkedIn profile. In that regard, in terms of what you're saying to government and the relevant powers, what is on what you're saying to them at the moment? In relation, what would you like them to do, or what's your shopping list?
My shopping list. Well, the first thing I think that all of the politicians realise is they need to stop listening to the civil servants who are actually recommending stuff. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of criticism kicking around of this Chancellor.
Yeah.
Because, I think it's fair what's being said as an intention for growth and what's being done don't quite fit together. I think that's true, but the advisors are the same advisors who, bake that cake and had those parties. They're still in number 10 and number 11. They're the civil servants. They're not, they are politicians with a small p, but they're not party politicians. They're still there. And unfortunately, they're the product of the system. So they've never, I would suspect those individuals have never been in a factory, and they've probably got the idea of a factory. And this is, you said 9%. You don't need to worry about manufacturing. It's only 9%.
I mean, I didn't say that, by the way, but that was the implication of what.
Yeah, but that's where they believe, because that's what they believe.
Yeah.
And if you say it enough, people start believing it. So I trust studies and proper stuff. But they probably, the closest they've been to a factory is a picture they've got of something that was run during the Victorian age, which, ain't the truth anymore. So
yeah, you want them to. So you want them to be listening to the actual people with boots on the ground.
And probably the concern I've got at the moment, which is a big campaign we've got, is not only do they need a proper business person or proper business people in this Industrial Strategy Advisory Council, as it's called, the ISAC. They actually need proper businesses too, because the business people they've got are like heads of PLCs and, dare I say it, trade union leaders.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since they've seen, shall we say, the coalface, and therefore they don't understand what the real issues are. And they're only representing the position as it applies to what
is there an underrepresentation of the SME sector?
Absolutely.
By the way, SME, we like to sort of jargon bust. People say that a lot. SME stands for small, medium-sized enterprises. But it's interesting. I did a study a few years back, and I looked for, and again, focusing on manufacturing businesses, but the same would apply. How many manufacturing businesses were there that turned over less than 20 million? Lots. And I mean lots. How many manufacturing businesses are there that turn over more than 20 million? Kind of not many. And that is where the definition of what government regard as an SME is anything that's turning over probably less than £1 billion, because it's below their digital calculation. So that's probably where they get their 9% from, because that 9% of GDP is generated by those big businesses. But what they're not thinking about is the myriad supply chain. And there are so many really, really good businesses employing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that are turning over anything between £500,000 and 20 million. And that's where it is. So my definition of an SME is not quite the same of what, if you like, a member of governments are, because they think an SME, as far as they're concerned, and bizarrely, they would regard somebody that is running the local hairdresser as an SME. That tick, it's one guy with a couple of chair renters. That's an SME. Then they go to a giant leap of somebody that's employing 500 people with a big factory. And they're also an SME.
Yeah,
with an audit and whatever else.
But then you've got this unrepresented sort of like population in the middle. And that applies across the board. That's what I would be wanting to change.
One practical thing they could do, actually, I just mentioned audits. They could shift that. They were hinting, they were showing some leg that they were going to change the audit threshold.
They did.
They've done it, have they?
They have.
Okay, so what's happened there?
So right, so all they've done is they've taken some recommendations that the last government came out with, but that's not hard because, as I say, it's the same people.
Yeah.
And they have raised the thresholds. But bizarrely, limited companies operate by a month end. Something like 80% of limited companies either have a March year end or a December year end.
Yes.
Yeah?
We have a March one.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're changing these rules from the 6th of April. Which is actually the start of the new personal tax year.
Yeah.
Don't ask me why.
Yeah.
I haven't got a Scooby.
Yeah.
But for anyone that's listening to this podcast,
You're going to have to do 6 days worth of accounts or something.
But yeah, well, the thing is that's the year that starts. So they've increased the thresholds by 50%. Other than you can't have the financial thresholds. There's 3. You have to pass 2 out of 3.
Go on. So do you know what they are off the top of your head, or
right?
Ish.
Yeah. All right. The new ones.
No, hang on. Let me just stop you there.
Yeah.
So the what we're talking about here is a business historically of a certain level of turnover each year.
LLP, or a limited company. Yeah.
If they go over a certain threshold, you then need to go through quite a cumbersome exercise of an audit where. It's an independent accountant comes in and effectively verifies your books and records and verifies that the numbers in your account are accurate.
That's spoken like a lawyer.
Okay, fair enough. Well, you tell me what it is in a second. But what I'm saying
it's the same set of rules, and they're increasingly regulated.
Yeah.
After a number of big company audit failures. Yeah. So the ones that you will have seen in the press have dictated a very, very significant tightening of the rules over a successive number of years, but subject to certain constraints. The same principles and the same work programs and the same independence applies to Mr. and Mrs. Smith's limited company as it does to XYZ PLC. There are some restrictions, but they are narrowing. So actually, it's one thing getting your accounts done. It's another thing getting them audited, and an auditing process is complicated, and it's time consuming and it's expensive.
Yeah. So pushing that up by 50% sounds like a good thing.
Yes, except of course all they've done is because it was the first time I actually used AI. I actually thought, I wonder. So I looked at when they changed the thresholds last time, and I just sort of said increase those financial thresholds by RPI, and you end up with a remarkably similar number.
Okay.
So all they've done is they've just rebased the index, and you get a year's life. So you get a year's free hit. So if you have a spike in your sales and then drop back down, you're okay. But if for more than 1 year you failed 2 of the tests, so it's all about the total assets of your business, and the new threshold for that is 7.5 million.
Okay.
Your turnover, which is 15 million.
Yeah, that was the number.
And the average number of your employees, which is 50, and that stayed the same.
If you get 2 of the 3...
Any 2 out of the 3, you fail any 2 out of the 3, then you get a year's life, but in the second year you will need an audit.
The 10 has gone up to 15, right?
Yeah, it's 10.2, I think, but it's gone up to
15. And a bit.
Yeah, 15. So it's not quite. So it's 15 million and it's 7.5.
So if you were to properly game change that, would you knock it up right up to like 25 million turnover?
Yeah, I would actually. Because if I go back to why I became an accountant, it was to make a difference and to advise businesses, to help them practice Thrival. For an owner-managed business, you know, if you're dealing with other people's money,
It's a
you
PLC.
absolutely need an audit.
Of course, yeah.
And I think it's right, even for the people that are running that. No, I mean, it's not just a PLC. It's any business where the management are involved, even on a voluntary basis. So I know a lot of family businesses, they've got members of the family all over the world. There's a value there in actually saying, you know what, never mind the people doing our accounts that we're quite close to. I can see there's some merit there in actually getting an independent auditor to do what we're doing. So it's all about who are the stakeholders, really. If somebody's got a big investment, some private equity investment, I can see the merit of there being an audit there, regardless of the size of the business. But for a lot of businesses, it probably could go up to a certain level. But if you want a hot tip,
go on.
The new rules for the new threshold. So just say, for example, you've got a £12 million turnover business. Mm-hmm. And the assets of that business are, let's say, 5.1 million. And it was 5.2, the threshold, but there's something else coming around the corner that would move that. And let's say you've got 25 employees. So you're currently at the cusp.
Yeah.
You might do a bit of growth. You can't see you getting to 15 million.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to escape it, and let's say you've got a March year end, what you could do, because you're allowed to, is to do a minor extension of your year end.
Yeah. Push it beyond
and actually make your accounts up, which you're allowed to the 5th of April. That means that the period ending 31st of March 2026, the next year, applies the new rules. As it stands at the moment, if you just think, oh yeah, next year I won't need an audit, and you make your accounts up to the 31st of March, the first 5 days are still under the old rules. Therefore, the first year that you could escape audit is the 31st of March 2027.
We like a nice little,
And before
loophole like that.
Well, it's not a loophole. It's the reverse of a loophole. It's a trap.
Yeah.
Before you blame the accountants,
yes,
I have no idea who did that, but it's one of the foibles of actually setting a new set of rules for a company relative to the personal tax year end. Illogical.
Okay, final thing.
That's a money saving exercise.
It is. You've given me a bit of a segue there, actually, because we've sort of been mentioning it on all of our podcasts recently. AI, the impact of that on your clients' businesses. Are you starting to see people? Is it landed yet? AI?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of businesses using AI for design. That's fine. A lot of people went a bit cheap as chips and put it all on ChatGPT.
Yeah, well, she's got the data protection exposures there. Yeah.
Absolutely, because it's open-ended.
Yeah.
And it was quite funny when you see manufacturers who won't go out and get a patent because if they get a patent over their products, they have to show the world.
Publish it, yeah, that's part of the deal.
And then their idea is somebody on the other side of the world, picking my words carefully, can then just go and copy it and then say, so sue me.
Yeah.
Yet happily, I've just designed this and they used ChatGPT to do it. And I said, and you were worried about patents, so you do need it to make sure that that you've got the data protection. But what AI can do in all sectors, I think, is take the mundane and collect the mundane and perform the mundane. But what I don't think that AI can or will be able to do, and I was talking to a group of accountants about this last night. It was some riveting. Yeah, it was actually. It was a good meeting. But I'll use the analogy of that. What AI can't do in our business, and I don't think can do in any business, is actually put the soul into whatever you're producing. And the big thing with AI is you can get AI to perform calculations or do designs, but at the end of the day, you still need to know what good looks like to double check it's right. And the reason I'd say that is everybody likes a spreadsheet. Everybody's used a spreadsheet. How many times have you produced something on a spreadsheet and you thought, that ain't the right answer? No. But you've got to have a good idea of it in the first place. Yeah. And the analogy I would use from a professional service business,
and we're meant to be the ones threatened.
Trusted advisors, How many trusted advisors do you see at their trusted client's funeral? How many cyborgs are you going to get at a client's funeral? And that's the point. That's the difference. That's, I think, what AI will never replace, that human connection.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is right, and fundamentally,
and the same also applies in relationships with any kind of business. Most businesses, there is a people side to it, isn't there?
No, absolutely. I mean, I experimented with Copilot on email. Copilot being the data protection GDPR friendly application.
Oh, I love it.
Well, I do quite like it. That said, I stopped using it so much to write emails because no matter what I did, it didn't quite sound like me. You know, I like a lovely short sentence, and I actually don't like to be too polite at the beginning of it. You know, thanking them so. You know, as a litigator, thank you so much for your recent email and all of that sort of stuff.
You know when somebody sends you an email that's been written by an AI, because it says, "Dear John, I hope you are well."
Yes. Yeah, no, it does. It does do all of that, and I sort of. I mean, of course, as the technology moved on, I guess it probably will be able to sort of ape, you know, my slightly passive aggressive tone in my emails.
I mean, you know, the clever stuff will machine learn that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you know, as a lawyer, you know, you're still going to want to check that you know, the AI-driven. The AI-driven contract that has been drafted, you're still going to look back and say, is that really what client A wanted? And it is that little bit on the edge.
And that's why actually ultimately people in terms of the professional services sector are, you're right actually, I mean, a great phrase, it's the soul of it, right? So the AI can write a song that sounds like Oasis, but it doesn't feel quite. It doesn't quite get the right thing, and I think that's true of providing professional advice. What will be interesting, I mean, I think it can be used to drive efficiencies, and to drive processes, which hopefully will, you know, legal sector is crying out for things like the time it takes to do a conveyancing or any kind of transaction really to come down, and to the extent it can assist lawyers in the due diligence process, in the reporting to clients on searches. I think that can and will happen, but I think you're right that ultimately a client who's coming to you with a problem or a task of some sort, ultimately it is that relationship, and that's the soul of it. That is why they're trusting you to provide that advice, and that's something I don't think an AI can ape it, but can never quite get there.
The concern I've also got, which takes us round in full circle about AI.
Go on.
And I'm not having a go at it. Right at the start, you poke the tiger with a stick by saying it's only 9%. The manufacturing's only 9%. You had heard.
Yes. I think it was 8%, by the way. If you watch
whatever.
Back.
Yeah, could be. Still wrong.
Yeah.
The point is, and this is the big fear, is this fake news thing. Because all that AI is doing is taking data from the World Wide Web that's out there, and it's manipulating that data, and it's reporting on that. It's collating and reporting and doing calculations based on that data. If that data is wrong, then you're going to get the wrong answer, aren't you? So I suppose the concern I would have, it goes back to Thrival, back in the risk box. If you're going to use AI, one of the risks is you're operating and using the wrong source data. Yeah. So how do you hold the power of that? You actually check where the AI, because you can do, has got the information from.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if it's a reliable source, then you're going to be in a lot better position.
I'm told that 50% of it is Reddit threads, by the way. There are some helpful guys out there on Reddit, but, are you going to go to a Reddit thread for your legal advice? I'd like to think not.
Yeah, but I used it a few weeks back to do some really complicated discounted cash flow calculations, for which there is a complicated mathematical formula, and it was great that I didn't have to go up and look it up in the book and find the formula. And what was marvellous is Copilot showed me its workings, and I recognised the formula.
It was right. It was correct.
Yeah. But I'd had in my head what I expected roughly the answer to be. So when it came back and gave it accurate, it was better than me, and then, I was slightly out, but that was a good test. And then I actually then retested it again with a different set of numbers and said, well, if that's working out right, I would expect it to be this. So I validated it.
Accelerated discounted cash flow is the difference in price between getting the money now and getting it in the future. Is that right?
Yeah.
Are you impressed that I know that?
Yeah, it is.
Thank you.
And one last thing that I will do is a big push to every limited company out there. There are changes looming from next year. If you're operating through leased premises, the accounting laws are changing, and you'll need to put in the present value, discounted cash flow again, of the value of your lease onto the assets of your business, which, by the way, will also affect whether you might need
Did that not used to be categorised as an asset at all, at least?
No.
Used to be categorised as a liability?
No, it's an operating lease. Oh, if it's a long lease, that's an asset.
That's an asset, yeah.
But a short lease...
like a lot of us have 10-year lease. I'm not trying to ask for advice here, by the way, but if you've got a 10-year lease,
5-year lease, or what have you, going forward, the rule has changed. It's already there for the very big companies, and that's why nobody cares about the effect on the little companies. Again, back to the other point I made, that you will need to say, okay, I've got a 5-year lease. £100,000 a year, that's an asset of £500,000. That's movie total assets, remember? But then you apply a discounting factor to that, and then equally below the line, and that's not total assets, you then recognise a liability. And you might say, oh yeah, I've not got a big problem about that. But if any of your listeners are working on a banking covenant,
okay,
that requires, say, your debt to be below a certain level, or your total assets to be a certain level.
This could have an impact on that.
Good idea. Again, go early. Another risk to your business.
Yeah. Well, go and speak to your accountant, right?
Well, yeah, and speak to your bank manager.
Yeah. On my speak to your bank manager and say, listen, this is just my business is exactly the same. It's just how the accounts rules are treating my lease that's changed. So can we get that? Can we get that edited, please, or get that amended?
And while you're on, I only turn over 12 million quid. Do you mind if I don't have an audit in the future? That might be what you want to have, the conversation you might want to have.
There'll be lots of people who've watched this podcast and would like to get in touch, so we can find you on the Crowe website. All the details are there, and on LinkedIn, as I've said. So Jonathan's an interesting follow on there, and he's often some comments on business generally, and also some of the lobbying role that he fulfills, in particular for manufacturing businesses in the West Midlands, which is something, as you can see from this podcast and his own origin story, he feels extremely he feels extremely connected to, deeply connected to, actually, for the fundamental reason he got into accountancy in the first place. So thank you, Jonathan, for coming along today, and hope, guys, you can click on the like and subscribe button, and we'll see you for the next podcast shortly.
Thank you very much.